MySpace was once the most visited website on the internet, even outranking Google. But in 2004, the MySpace founders had a meeting with a young guy named Mark Zuckerberg who was offering to sell them his website, which was then called The Facebook. The price he wanted was $75 million, but MySpace turned him down. And why wouldn't they? At the time, MySpace was thriving and was by far the most popular social media platform. So how did MySpace go from being worth billions of dollars and one of the most loved sites on the internet to being nothing but a nostalgic memory? With its quirky interface and customizable profiles, MySpace represents the road untaken, the path social media could have gone before Facebook crushed the competition. But the reasons MySpace failed are not what you might think. And the rise and fall of MySpace is certainly not your typical business story. This video is the truth about what happened to MySpace, how an internet empire was both built and destroyed. The domain name MySpace.com was initially bought for an internet storage business, essentially an early version of cloud hosting like Dropbox or Google Drive. In fact, you can see here a version of MySpace from the year 2000. But like many early internet businesses, the file storage company never made it, especially after the dot-com bubble burst and investors stopped pouring money into internet companies. However, a guy called Chris DeWolf bought the MySpace domain thinking it might be useful in the future. Of course, he was right. But for a while, he did nothing with it. Instead, him and a friend called Tom Anderson founded a direct email marketing firm called ResponseBase, which created email newsletters for other companies. Now, if you ever had a MySpace account yourself, you may well recognize Tom, as he's the one who later became the face of MySpace. But like a lot of early internet pioneers, Tom Anderson had started out as a teenage hacker, spending time on internet message boards and hacking into companies' websites just for the sheer thrill of it. And so between Tom and Chris, they had plenty of internet experience, and they made a good team. And of course, in the early 2000s, lots of businesses were testing out the internet for the first time, so Tom and Chris's company ResponseBase was perfectly positioned to sign up clients who didn't know what they were doing and needed help advertising their business online. Thus, ResponseBase grew quickly, and within just a year, Tom and Chris managed to sell their business to an even bigger marketing company called eUniverse in the year 2000 for $3.3 million. Now, this company, eUniverse, would later become most well known for being MySpace's parent company, but in 2002, before MySpace was created, eUniverse owned a bunch of different websites, some of which were a little dodgy. In fact, eUniverse was once dubbed the trailer park of the internet. The thing you have to remember is back then, internet users were a lot more naive. People were more likely to click on flashing banner ads, open spam emails, and buy products that seemed too good to be true, and usually were. And eUniverse capitalized on this. For example, eUniverse sold heavily marked up items like wrinkle creams, along with books such as How to Grow Taller. But probably eUniverse's most controversial site was the one that offered free downloads of mouse cursors, such as a cursor that looked like the American flag. Except when users downloaded the cursor, they unknowingly downloaded spyware that would track their activity across other websites. When the story eventually broke about this, eUniverse inevitably suffered from bad publicity. They later renamed their entire business to Intermix Media and tried to create a more professional persona. But the fact was, their company was in trouble. Users were gradually becoming less likely to click on unfamiliar advertising, and their newsletters were becoming less effective as spam filters were growing more sophisticated. As a result, eUniverse, or Intermix Media as they were now calling themselves, considered shutting down several of their sites, including ResponseBase. The original founders of ResponseBase, Chris and Tom, had still been working on it even after selling the business, and they realized they needed a new plan. Now, around this same time, early versions of social media sites had started to grow in popularity. For example, blog-type platforms such as LiveJournal. However, the biggest inspiration for MySpace was a site called Friendster, which was founded in 2002. Tom Anderson had seen what Friendster was doing, allowing people to connect online and share things with their friends, and thought the concept was really promising, but that it had a lot of issues. For example, Friendster had a closed system that made it difficult to connect with people you didn't already know offline. Plus, Friendster had other problems like very long page load times. Tom Anderson felt if the concept was done better, it had huge potential, so he approached his boss at Intermix Media with an idea, creating an improved Friendster without the restrictions. A successful social media venture could help move the company away from spam emails and banner ads, so Intermix Media agreed to the project. And Chris said he already had the perfect domain name they could use, MySpace.com. In August 2003, MySpace officially launched to the public, and they offered a cash prize to whichever employee could sign up the most users. MySpace had a big advantage because of its parent company Intermix Media, since they were a marketing company and had a very long list of email accounts they could advertise their new site to. Plus, unlike Friendster, MySpace allowed users much greater freedom, like people could view the profile of any other user. However, one of MySpace's most unique and popular features came about by accident. While running an update, the programmers forgot to block web markup, which meant MySpace users had the ability to edit their own page using HTML code. This meant users could fully customize their pages and use whatever backgrounds, colors, layouts, or fonts they wanted. Countless teenagers would eventually learn to code in HTML in order to customize their MySpace homepage, and thus people's profiles became very creative. Like, you could even choose what song you wanted to play when someone visited your page. This meant every person's page was very different and tailored to them. Although there was one thing everyone on MySpace had in common. Everyone started off with one friend already added, co-founder Tom Anderson. So, MySpace was up and running, and this time it was really the dawn of Web 2.0. Whereas the early internet was experienced mostly passively, like just reading text on web pages, Web 2.0 saw the rise of user-generated content. MySpace immediately started to gain a lot of traction, especially amongst teenagers. And of course, they all told their friends about the site, so word spread quickly. And thus, within just 1 month of launching, MySpace was registering 6,000 new members every day. MySpace's momentum started to grow even faster when they decided to advertise their site as a great way for musicians to build a following. Since file sharing sites like Napster and mp3.com had recently shut down, there was a vacuum for artists looking to promote themselves online. So, several nights a week, co-founders Chris and Tom went out to LA clubs like the Viper Room to convince bands to sign up for MySpace. Before long, they were traveling to nightclubs all across the country, throwing parties and sponsoring events to help promote MySpace. And this paid off. Not only did a lot of musicians join MySpace, many of them started to gain popularity thanks to the site, including artists like Arctic Monkeys, Calvin Harris, Lily Allen, Panic at the Disco, and countless more who utilized MySpace to grow their fan base and get their music heard. By February of 2004, MySpace had registered its 1 millionth user, and by November, that number would grow to 5 million, and growth continued to skyrocket from there. This led to some of the very first influencers, such as Tila Tequila, who grew a very big following on MySpace. MySpace was also instrumental in the early days of YouTube. Users were able to embed videos from YouTube directly onto their MySpace page, and MySpace's vibe fit perfectly with the kind of offbeat, homemade videos that were popular on early YouTube. However, whilst MySpace's ability to connect with anyone in the world and completely customize your page were features that attracted many users to the site, instead of competitors like Friendster, these same features also began to create some very serious problems. A 2005 piece by MSNBC highlighted the amount of teenagers using sites like MySpace without their parents' knowledge, and shows like To Catch a Predator stoked fears of online predators. Plus, there were headlines about some adults using MySpace to pursue relationships with underage users. MySpace sought the advice of the online safety group Wired Safety, which recommended that MySpace actually lower its minimum age requirement, with the logic that this would encourage teens to be more truthful when registering and make it easier for MySpace to keep an eye on its most vulnerable users. However, it was too late. There was one particularly tragic incident where a 13-year-old girl named Megan Meyer was relentlessly cyberbullied through MySpace, leading to her taking her own life. And this wasn't an isolated incident. MySpace began to get a bad reputation for its lack of moderation and the amount of young, impressionable users receiving abuse. Additionally, there were reports of minors being exposed to adult content. Now, officially this wasn't allowed, and MySpace did employ moderators, but the handful of employees responsible for sifting through the countless thousands of images uploaded daily had an impossible task. This not only sparked concerns from parents, but also from advertisers. The lack of sufficient moderation made advertisers nervous, and despite the site's rapid growth, MySpace struggled to sell advertising, at least not for very good prices. It's reported around this time advertisers paid MySpace only 20 cents per 1,000 viewers, much lower than other similar sites. The media also started to question whether the site was safe for its young user base, and whilst the MySpace team were focusing on trying to address these issues, they completely neglected everything else. For example, in October 2005, a 19-year-old hacker named Sami Kamkar used MySpace to release the fastest spreading computer virus the world had ever seen. You see, because MySpace had given users so much freedom to edit the code of their pages, it meant malicious code could also be inserted, especially since MySpace had almost no security team. In just a few days, Sami created what would become known as the Sami worm. Thankfully, the worm Sami created was harmless. All it was designed to do was when someone visited his profile, profile, it automatically added Sammy as a friend and added words on their profile saying, most of all, Sammy is my hero. But the worm was also programmed to copy itself on their profile as well, so anyone who visited their profile would also get infected, and thus it became a self-propagating worm and spread very rapidly. Even Sammy had no clue it would spread so fast. Within less than 24 hours, over 1 million users had been infected and had unknowingly sent Sammy a friend request and added text on their profile saying Sammy was their hero. The MySpace team had to temporarily shut down the entire site to fix the problem, and if Sammy had been someone with more malicious intentions, he could have caused catastrophic damage. Meanwhile, MySpace's founders were growing frustrated with their parent company. It took Intermix Media too long to buy badly needed equipment, and all of MySpace's servers were stored in rented space at a data center. Crammed together because the data center charged by the square foot, MySpace's servers were literally melting. And because the data center was local to the company in Los Angeles, a power outage in LA meant the entire website went offline. But the reason Intermix weren't investing enough into MySpace was because Intermix had financial problems of its own. Anti-spyware legislation was popping up across the country, and private emails were leaked showing Intermix Media's use of spyware, a plan the CEO referred to as Operation Super Trojan. Intermix eventually agreed to pay fines of $7.5 million. The MySpace founders actually tried to disassociate themselves from their parent company, Intermix Media, since it had such an increasingly bad reputation. There's reports the MySpace founders got angry when MySpace t-shirts were produced that also had the Intermix logo on. And yet, despite all of these problems, the cyberbullying, the lack of moderation, the security holes, the poor infrastructure, the negative media attention, despite all of it, MySpace continued to grow quickly. It was simply fun to use, and people kept referring their friends to the site. But at this moment in 2005, a turning point in MySpace history occurs. MySpace co-founder Chris DeWolf met with Mark Zuckerberg about the possibility of acquiring Facebook. Zuckerberg wanted $75 million for his company, which Chris thought was too expensive, and so the deal never went ahead. Of course, now that we know Facebook later became worth literally hundreds of billions of dollars, this looks like a pretty terrible choice. But to be fair, back then, $75 million was a huge price for a fairly new, unproven internet company. So whilst it's easy for us to look back with hindsight and say it's foolish MySpace didn't buy Facebook when they had the chance, remember that even MySpace, who were much bigger than Facebook at the time, weren't actually making much profit at that point. But still, this decision not to buy Facebook meant the two companies would soon be in a direct battle. However, before that, it's time to introduce an unexpected character in the MySpace story. Before we get to the next chapter of the MySpace story, let's talk about you. Because we've seen how back when MySpace started, building things online was hard. You had to code the website yourself, manage server space, and countless other technical challenges. But thanks to today's video sponsor Shopify, now anyone can easily start, grow, and manage a business, even if you have no technical experience. I love that within minutes, you can design your website exactly how you want it and start accepting payments for your products or services. So the only question is, what is your business idea? Because if you watch my channel and like these business stories, there is a high chance you've thought about starting a business of your own. And that's why I think Shopify is great for entrepreneurs. They make the whole process of getting started so much simpler and help you bring your idea to life. And the best part is that if you use my link in the description below, you can get a completely free trial to test out Shopify for yourself. So just click the link below to get started now for free. Despite its problems, MySpace had finally reached profitability. It was a small profit, but it was proof that there was money to be made here. And what was even more clear is that there was a lot of attention on MySpace. As a result, several legacy media giants saw MySpace as an attractive prospect and became interested in acquiring it. A bidding war was sparked between Viacom and News Corp, which was eventually won by News Corp, owner of the Fox networks, and much, much more. News Corp bought Intermix Media for $518 million, although everyone knew that out of all the sites Intermix owned, it was MySpace that had really caught their interest. Now, this seemed like a large amount to pay for the site at the time, since back then many people were skeptical of whether advertisers would ever pay much to advertise on social media. But it's reported the MySpace founders were able to convince Rupert Murdoch, News Corp's founder, to buy the company in just one meeting, as they told him MySpace was actually the perfect media company because users generate content themselves, so there's no content cost, and users invite their own friends, so there's no distribution or acquisition costs. Murdoch loved this, and thus the deal was followers agreed. And for a little while after News Corp bought the business, things were going great. By July 2006, MySpace was receiving 54 million monthly visitors, and 75-year-old Rupert Murdoch appeared on the cover of Wired with the headline, "Rupert Murdoch, Teen Idol, News Corp and the Future of MySpace." However, whilst many thought Murdoch's money would save MySpace and help them fix their issues, this acquisition by News Corp had the opposite effect. MySpace became more corporate and bureaucratic after being bought by News Corp, and this slowed them down. They also now had strict advertising revenue targets to hit, and so monetization was prioritized above the product. And since ad rates were low, this meant News Corp just pushed more and more ads, including very low-quality, spammy ads that annoyed users. Ultimately, Murdoch viewed the site as a money machine, not a long-term business investment. He'd envisioned MySpace more as a way to distribute News Corp media rather than building a community platform. Facebook, on the other hand, had initially only allowed people with verified college email addresses to join their platform, which had helped give the site a feeling of exclusivity and hype. It wasn't until 2005 that Facebook had dropped its requirement of a college email address and opened Facebook to the whole world. Plus, in contrast to MySpace, Facebook had venture capital funding and was thinking more long-term. They operated more like a fast-moving startup, as they didn't have the same kind of bureaucracy and corporate bosses demanding advertising targets be hit. As Facebook started to gain more momentum, it was soon clear that Facebook and MySpace were in very direct competition, and that there was only going to be one winner in this war for attention. Despite both being social media sites, Facebook and MySpace were always different. For example, Facebook's design was minimalist, with little ability to customize. Everyone's page had the same format, and thus the site looked the same for everyone. Meanwhile, MySpace was extremely customizable, but this actually created a lot of issues. Like users' cluttered profiles with custom codes slowed down browsers, or some profiles would even play songs or videos automatically, which a lot of people found very annoying. It was messy and chaotic. Because the fact is, most people are not good designers, and so letting people do whatever they wanted meant people's profiles were often unreadable, had horrible color clashes, and were filled with animations and flashing images. While some people liked this, a divide started to take shape. MySpace was more for teenagers, and Facebook was more for college students and adults. As it seemed to have a wider mass appeal, Facebook maintained a very clean, consistent, and user-friendly experience across the whole site. So whilst MySpace was great for kids who'd grown up on the internet, Facebook seemed more organized and easy to use for everyone else. MySpace's more customized approach also made introducing new features much harder and slower, since everyone's pages were completely different. Facebook, on the other hand, with its sleeker, more uniform approach, could move faster. They also let external developers create apps for Facebook, whereas MySpace mostly tried to do everything themselves, which meant they were slower to develop new features. Facebook's introduction of the newsfeed feature also made Facebook feel more like a community, and it began to grow a lot faster. But for now, MySpace was still the world's leading social media service, and its user base was still growing quickly. In June 2006, versions were released in the UK, Australia, and Germany, followed by versions for a dozen other countries. Research company eMarketer announced that in 2006, MySpace generated $118 million in revenue in the US alone, which at the time was twice the combined revenue of Facebook, Friendster, and AOL Instant Messenger. At its peak, in January 2007, MySpace was registering 320,000 new members a day. So MySpace still had the advantage despite Facebook's recent growth. In June 2007 came the launch of MySpace TV, including a TMZ celebrity gossip channel and MySpace's first original program, Roommates. The thing is, MySpace were missing where the real money was in social media. That same year, 2007, Facebook launched its Facebook ads platform, leveraging user data to create an ad system that let advertisers target users very specifically using all the personal data Facebook had on its users. This was extremely useful for advertisers and thus very profitable for Facebook. They moved faster than MySpace and attracted more advertisers. MySpace, on the other hand, continued to have internal issues and disagreements. They tried several new CEOs, but the first one left after a year, and the next one after just 4 months. MySpace began to lose both money and traffic each year. It didn't help that MySpace's website had initially been built using a software called Cold Fusion. This had been good at the time as it allowed them to build the MySpace website extremely quickly and get to market fast, but it now meant MySpace's infrastructure was not as scalable and created a bunch of technical challenges. Ultimately, with its buggy applications, the annoying ads plastered everywhere, and its seedy reputation in the media, MySpace's popularity was starting to fall. Hey guys, before we get to the next part of the story, I just want to say that if you find these videos interesting, please consider turning on notifications for Magnates Media. I'm working on some even bigger projects right now, so if you want to make sure you see them when they're ready, just hit the notification bell now. Also, I just want to say a massive thank you for watching this channel. These videos do take a long while to make, so honestly, I really appreciate all your comments and support. So yeah, thank you for everything, and now let's get back to the story. By 2009, Facebook had overtaken MySpace in number of users. It's hard to imagine today, but back then, Facebook was seen as the cool, new, popular thing. The momentum had shifted, and because social platforms rely on network effects, once more users start switching to a different platform, many others follow if that's where the action now is. This began a steep decline for MySpace. Their monthly users dropped by 44%, and constrained by its users' busy, customized profiles, there just wasn't enough space for innovative new features. Plus, the custom profiles created long load times, one of the same problems that had helped MySpace beat Friendster in the first place. In 2009, both Chris DeWolf and Tom Anderson left their roles with Intermix Media. Overall, staff was reduced by 47% in this period, and by this point, Rupert Murdoch himself had also lost interest in MySpace. Thus, in June 2011, News Corp sold Intermix Media for an estimated $35 million, a tiny fraction of what they paid for it. Over the next few years, MySpace was sold several more times at lower and lower prices to various different companies who wrongly believed they could save the site. MySpace became mentioned less and less, and became a dimly remembered artifact of social media before the dominance of Facebook. However, to just say Facebook killed MySpace is a bit of an oversimplification, as really, MySpace could and should have won. It's just they made so many bad decisions themselves. In fact, Sean Parker, the first president of Facebook, described it like this.
And MySpace is another case where a company just blew it. Facebook had no chance to win. We should not have won the market. The network effects in MySpace were so powerful. The only reason we won was because of the gross incompetence of MySpace systematically over a period of many years.
Whilst that's perhaps a little harsh, it's hard to deny that MySpace had a huge lead on Facebook, and that with some better decisions, they could have perhaps remained the king of social media. And it would be interesting how different the world might be if they had. But technically speaking, MySpace is still alive today, except it's now completely focused on music. And in 2019, MySpace did generate some headlines for the first time in a while, just not for the reasons they wanted, as MySpace announced that due to a mistake while migrating servers, the company had lost nearly 50 million songs. In an instant, the company had accidentally deleted nearly 2 decades worth of music that had been uploaded to MySpace, much of it by unsigned artists and without official releases, meaning there might not have been another copy. This was just yet another example of poor management and mistakes in MySpace's troubled history. Of course, for lots of people, MySpace still brings back many fond memories. And as for everyone's old friend Tom, the whole MySpace experience wasn't really a failure for him at all. He made millions of dollars from selling his site, and is now happily retired, traveling the world, enjoying his love of photography. Although, as he shares his photos on platforms like Twitter and Instagram, he must surely think about what could have been if MySpace had made some better decisions. Now, speaking of internet companies that were once very successful, but then lost their dominance after turning down the chance to buy Facebook, have you heard about the story of Yahoo? You're not going to want to miss this one. Just click the thumbnail on screen now, and I'll see you there. Cheers.